That's how to price cloud products. For full disclosure, I left my position at SAP in April, so I'm formally from SAP. But I'll kind of tell you a bit about my journey to start with. So I have a mixed journey in my product management career. So my education is in, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in nutrition and biochemistry. So one thing I really like about, and I was one course short of a minor in business administration. Oddly enough, an occupational psychology course is what I didn't take. And so what I really like about product management is it's a mixture of, from my point of view, psychology, business, and technology. And so my career started at the University of Connecticut. I was a system administrator, network engineer. I already had programming skills, so and I used those skills there to start writing utilities for myself, and became part of a larger integration product dealing with computer-based learning at the time. And so then from there, I went and worked for a nutraceuticals company who sold their products direct, and built them an e-commerce website from scratch, and that website does over $50 to $100 million a year. And then from there, I went and became a startup, a consulting firm, and did niche consulting for Fortune 500 companies for 5 years, all in software-based consulting. So custom systems for e-commerce, ERP, CRM. For some of these companies were my clients, like Best Buy, Bell Canada, Federated Department Stores, as well as others. And so then from there, I went and worked for a fintech startup based out of Silicon Valley as a senior engineer, software engineer, and software architect. And around this time, I also had some business partners, and we started up and founded an early microservices-based technology company. And from that, got a patent in an early microservices technology. And the business didn't quite work out business-wise, but the technology was really awesome, and that patent's been cited about 35 times by other companies like Amazon and Microsoft and SAP. And then I went on and worked at SAP, where I came in as a product manager, was promoted at some point to chief technical product manager and chief architect of a voice over IP telephony solution for contact centers. So real-time communications platform for contact centers used by many large and small businesses, so that when you called a phone number, a customer service agent would pick up the phone, but they didn't have a real phone. It was a virtual phone on their computer, kind of like Skype or FaceTime kind of thing, but fully integrated with SAP's ERP and CRM systems. And then from there, I moved on, and my last role at SAP was as the Senior Director of Product and Strategy within their customer experience portfolio, which included marketing automation software, sales, service, e-commerce, and those kinds of platforms. So that's kind of my product management journey. More recently, I teach a class at University of Washington in software development. So that's kind of my current role at the moment. I moved here earlier this year to Seattle, the Seattle area, and left my job at SAP in April. So this is my journey so far. My wife and I also have a small startup that we run together. So that's kind of our latest adventure. But that's kind of my background in a nutshell. So engineering, business, and psychology. What I like about product management is it's a mixture of business, psychology, and technology. And so for me, the psychology part is dealing with customers, understanding their behaviors, understanding what they want, what they like, what they need, as well as negotiating with and understanding stakeholders who I have to work with. So in my last role at SAP, I was the liaison to the global pricing department, legal department, controlling and account and finance, sales, consulting, marketing, and the product teams. So dealt with a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different concerns. And so one of the things that I was responsible for was pricing and packaging of our cloud products. And so that's what my presentation's about today. So I picked this topic of pricing because I find it's a topic that, at least, to me, it's heavily tied to product management, but I also find it's not often spoken about as a product management opportunity or task. And so it's often sometimes it's in the realm of marketing or finance, but I think it closely aligns with product, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. But I think it's a core skill set product managers should have, and I think it aligns with what product managers do. So today I'm going to talk about how that fits together. I'm going to give you a framework with some examples on how to do pricing. We'll go through a fictitious company and kind of go through how I would look at pricing that product. And then we'll talk about just kind of more generic pricing and packaging strategies as we go. There's lots of books written about product market fit and other topics on pricing, like freemium pricing and things like that. I find when they talk about product market fit, sometimes price is mentioned, sometimes it's not. But how this fits together for me is you might have a product that's really awesome, that people love, that people are willing to use. But then the final question becomes, are people willing to pay for it? And if they do pay for it, how much are they willing to pay? And if they are willing to pay, can you make a profit doing it? Can you build a business out of it? And can you, actually grow and sustain long term with that product? So you can have something totally awesome that no one wants to buy. So it's super, they like it, they use it, but not willing to pay for it, or not willing to pay enough for you to build a business out of it. So that's kind of how that fits together for me. By the way, these are really awesome books that I've read as well. So, but yeah, so here's how I see product management and pricing and how they fit together. This is product in general, but the pricing part's at the bottom. So I call this the product value cycle. So really the main goal of a product manager is to create a product. And in creating that product, it has to solve a problem or meet a need or be something that customers want to use or that benefits them in some way. So in creating that product, it creates value within that product, right? And it's kind of like potential energy, like in physics class. So I call that's a potential value, right? So this product does something, and then when people buy it and use it, they unlock the value that's trapped in that product, right? So the actual using of the product is what meets the needs of the purchaser or the consumer or the user. And so, right? So product managers put value in the product, customers extract value out of the product, and then in return for extracting that value, they have to return some of that value back to the organization or team or company that built that product. And that's through payment. So, and payment is usually a fraction, or should be a fraction, of what the product costs, right? So no one wants to pay more for the product than it's worth. And if they pay too little, then for what it's worth, then the product isn't sustainable or manageable long term. So whether that be a physical good or a digital product, either way, if it costs too much to repair your dishwasher, you're not going to want to repair it, right? So, anyway, so that's how I view this cycle. Product managers create value through the products, customers extract that value, and then they return some of that value as payment back to the product organization. And I'll go through different variations of payment as well. For me, it's not just monetary payment. There's other forms of payment as well. But we'll get to that as we go. So that's just my synopsis there. But my key takeaway here from that is the amount they pay has to be significantly less than the value they receive, in the order of at least 10 times the value received versus what they pay to use or gain the product. So here's why I think pricing is a product function, or at least needs to be closely aligned with product. So as core product management skills and roles go, product managers are responsible for researching customers and customer needs and wants and desires. And that's how product managers determine what they're going to build and why they're going to build it. So that's number one. So number two, in doing that, they identify different types of customers, different customer personas, different customer pain points, and that all leads to features, right? So what are we going to build? And then at the end, the product manager has to understand the value of the features they're creating. So there's no reason to build something if it doesn't have value to the customer. Product managers prioritize what they're going to build based on how much value it provides. And so since pricing is the return of that value or the capture of that value back to the product organization, the people who know the value of the product best are those who are creating it, or the product managers who have designed or devised the product through all the research they've done. So I think they're the best fit in having those product discussions to understand how much value to recapture. And so, also, I look at this as an upfront process where it's not just about, I've been and seen organizations where they develop a product first and then try to price it after. But I think if you sometimes operating that way is dangerous, in that you might find that, again, no one wants to buy what you've created or is not willing to pay enough for what you've created. So I think this needs to be an upfront discussion, and determining, it should be part of the prioritization process, right? How much is a customer willing to pay for this feature or product or add-on or whatever? And if the value isn't there, then maybe it shouldn't be built in the first place. So that's, or maybe the value needs to be rediscovered or reevaluated. So here's like a fictitious company that we can use to walk through some examples. I'm going to call it like an accounting or bookkeeping cloud product for like small businesses. And so we're going to call, the product is called Account Manager, totally fictitious. And so some of its key features are tracking income and expenses, sending invoices, maximizing tax deductions for small businesses, has reports and analytics, can export data feeds for your tax accountant, things like that. So these are some key features. So now I'll talk about some of the benefits, right? So what's the value those features provide to the company or user that uses it? So it'll save time for the companies that use it, small businesses that use it, and they'll save on average 40 hours a month, not having to manually keep their books or use spreadsheets or things like that. They'll get paid faster by being able to send invoices electronically. They'll have an average of $3,000 a year in tax savings. And because now it's a cloud-based solution and they can use a remote bookkeeping service, they can save $3,000 a year by using a remote bookkeeping or offshore bookkeeping service as opposed to using their local accountant. So these are just some key value benefits they'll get by using this product. So the first thing you got to know, so if I just double back here real quick. So this is like the key benefits and the ways we can measure these benefits towards a consumer or user of the product. So some of it's time savings, some of it's getting paid faster, which is kind of like a cash churn sort of metric, if you will, how much cash you have to outlay before you get it back, or time do you outlay before you get paid for it. And then direct monetary savings, right? So then you have to figure out now, so now that we know the value we think we're putting in this product that we estimate, you still need someone to pay for it. So does the customer think they're getting that value? Can you tell them they're getting that value? And how do you find out what a customer is willing to pay? So it's one thing to provide value, it's another to find out how much someone's willing to pay for that value. So one thing you have to think about is price sensitivity. So what is the most they're willing to pay to solve, to get this benefit? And that will differ from customer to customer. This is kind of where market segmentation and customer segmentation comes out. So for one group of customers, they might be willing to pay more than another group of customers. There might be a set of features you have to provide one set of customers that they're willing to pay for that set of features, whereas another set of customers might pay for a slightly different set of features, but they're willing to pay more or less for that. So price sensitivity takes all those things into account. And so what's the most they're willing to pay? I mean, if you look at cars, you can go buy a Honda or a Toyota for like 30 grand a year, or you can go buy a Tesla for 250 grand a year, right? They're both cars, they both get you from point A to B, but there's a clear reason why one costs more than the other. So there's different people who, find other value in those things besides getting from point A to B potentially, right? So that's where price sensitivity falls in. How much are they willing to pay? And then, what is the ROI of a customer using the product? Does the customer understand that ROI? And so again, not just monetary ROI, but time savings, cost savings, customer satisfaction, attention from others. A lot of people, why do people wear fashionable clothes or flashy suits or whatever? So, some of that probably factors into getting attention from others. Feeling good about themselves, like however they map that. But in the end, that's part of the ROI of using the product. It may not all be monetary, but in some way it's measurable. And in some way, you should be able to glean as a product manager what that ROI is, even if it's just customer satisfaction or feeling good or being healthy or whatever. So, and then like I mentioned earlier, the value a customer receives must be a multiple of the cost they're paying. And so, somewhere starting around 10 times is kind of the sweet spot-ish where it makes sense for a customer to buy. I mean, not that there's, I mean, 5 times might be a starting place as well, but on average, 10 times is kind of what you're looking for as a kind of a starting point. So no, I'll go through a couple examples here. So with our account manager software example, so like here's one way we can look at willingness to pay, right? So if we have a scenario where there's a self-employed, plumber or something, right? Electrician, plumber, and they bill $65 an hour. They spend 12 hours a week managing their books and invoicing customers, which is clearly not how they make money, right? They make money doing other activities, but this is something they have to do to get paid. They're 4.3 weeks in a month on average in a year. And so we, from our surveys, have figured out that we think customers will save an average of 40 hours a month if they use our software. So if they don't use our software, this guy will, this person will spend 12 hours a week times 4.3 weeks a month, or 51 hours a month doing his accounting. With our software, we think he'll spend about 11 hours a month or 12 hours a month doing accounting and invoicing. So after saving those 40 hours, let's say he can turn 10 of those 40 hours into billable hours, and then in addition to saving the time, he's now going to make an extra $650 a month from the time he's recaptured. And so to measure that ROI, we'd say they get that $650 benefit for a subscription fee of $60 a month, which would be an approximate ROI of 983%, 9, almost 10 times value created from that $60 subscription. Cool, does that make sense? Awesome. So that's one way we could kind of turn this time into money savings. So now, how do we quantify this value even further? So I just gave you one example of how we did it for like the time savings. So, but now we can take the other savings too and throw them into like a spreadsheet. And so we said there's tax savings involved, there's bookkeeping time savings, there's the time savings we mentioned kind of in that last example where they can convert their accounting time to billable time. And so in lots of cloud-based products, you'll have different bundles or pricing tiers, and there might be like a bronze version, a silver version, a gold version, all with different sets of features geared towards different types of customers with different types of needs. So like our bronze version may not have all the features needed, for certain things. The silver might have invoicing added in. The gold might have a bookkeeping service added in or something, And so the platinum is where you'd expect to get the most value from. And so that's where we'd have all the features, and probably our biggest, most valuable customers would use that. And so they'd get the best, the biggest advantage from using it. So if we look here, so we take all those savings, we add them up for each tier. And so we'd say, if you buy in the bronze tier and you spend $120 a year, $10 a month, we'd expect you to save $3,500 a year. And based on that, you'd get a benefit of 28-fold on your cost. And then if you follow that all the way through, we'd expect the platinum people, subscribers, to get a benefit of $15,000 a year with a $720 cost. And they would get a 21 times multiple on their value. So this is just kind of an example of how we can quantify this, willingness to pay in some ROI type fashion. So now this is kind of how do we look at the actual pricing? Like, so that column where I had the subscription fees. So like, how do we get to that on some level? So at this point we have the customer's willingness to pay. We understand on some level what we expect the ROI and value to be for the customer using our product. And so now how do we get to a price? So we can look at this 2 ways. I mean, there's more than 2 ways, but I'll net out kind of 2 or 3 ways here. So there's the costs, right? There's the cost of what it costs us to deliver the product. And so that's like the cost of sales or cost of goods for this product. So that includes things like infrastructure costs, licensing and subscription costs for any third-party services or things that we rent or subscribe to, or licenses for for using proprietary patents or things like that. DevOps costs, so development resources, human resources for setting up, maintaining, upgrading the actual hardware, and then support costs. which would be customer support, phone calls come in, whatever, email support, as well as development support for developers to fix problems, bugs with the software. So nowhere in here do you see R&D costs, you don't see marketing costs, you don't see things like that. This is purely the cost to deliver the product, not to develop it and not to sell it. So this is my concept of pricing. So cost plus a margin, and then also create a value range. So the cost plus a margin is protecting your operational costs, and then that value range is where you want to sell. And again, different types of customers might be willing to pay different amounts, so that's why it's a range. So that's kind of the quick recap. So I guess the one thing, right? So there's floor price, the minimum we're willing to sell at. There's the list price, the most someone's willing to pay. But there's also the sale price, the actual price that we sell the product to for a particular customer. So these are how these things are related. So the next is, so here's an example of some of these floor price calculations for our account manager product. So if we have 4 product bundles, if we have these features bundled 4 different ways, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, right? We might have one set of infrastructure costs. Those infrastructure costs for a cloud product would be things like, think of any service on Azure or Google Cloud or Amazon, AWS, right? So things like compute cycles, network bandwidth, storage, any other services that they provide, image recognition services if you use one out of the box, machine learning services, routing services, load balancers, all those sorts of things, right? So that's what infrastructure involves. Licensing, I mean, this could be anything, but if you have to license a patent, like for instance, I had that voice over IP telephony solution. There were certain codecs that we were using that were patented codecs that were industry standard, and so there were licensing fees we had to pay to use those codecs, and so that became one of our costs to deliver that product. In this particular model, I just kind of populated it to kind of show that it's a cost, but account manager might not need a licensing fee of any sort, but anyway. And then DevOps would be the human labor needed to maintain services, spin up services. Even if you're using a cloud-hosted provider, there's still some sort of DevOps involved. There's someone who's creating scripts or packages or whatever to take the software that your development team's creating and deploy it to these servers, make sure there's resources being utilized properly, making sure it scales up when needed and scales down when needed, upgrades to the software, all these sorts of things, monitoring. And so that's like these DevOps costs. Customer support, again, would be things like anyone calling a help number or web chat or email or how do I use this or this is broken, bug reports, whatever. And then dev support is developers who are actually fixing those bugs. So again, not R&D, but fixing the existing product to make sure it operates as it's supposed to. And then all those added together would be your fulfillment cost. So if you took everything that's in yellow on the top there and added it up horizontally, right, the bronze package fulfillment cost is like $1.1 million. And I'll go into what units this is. So what does 1.1 million mean? Like how many customers does that serve or what metric does that really come down to? So if you look at I'll jump ahead to the bottom real quick. So if you look at the bottom where I have projected users, so those costs that go across that line on the top, that fulfillment cost, that's to service the 75,000 users. Like if you look at the platinum. So we're estimating 75,000 users will use the platinum package. And it costs $1.6 million to operate this, the feature set and deploy it and all that for the 75,000 platinum customers. But then the bronze customers, we say there's 750,000 of those bronze customers, and it costs 1.1 million to satisfy those 750,000. Keep in mind, this is all like wacky, just examples, so may or may not be real. So this is more like the 750,000 costs 1.1 million to operate. So that's all pretty much flattened out and calculated into that 1.1 million in this case. But I definitely have more complex versions of this that show what you're asking for. And that's how I'd get to these numbers. That was a more involved discussion, so I netted it out. So that fulfillment cost is to satisfy or fulfill for the number of projected users in that bundle. And then if you looked at minimum margin, let's say we all, I don't know, you don't always have a flat margin either, right? But let's say we're at minimum willing to make 30%. We find out the total floor price with the margin involved, we're added in, and that's on the top right. But then if we go down to the bottom, right, so now we have that total floor carried down again. Now let's find out, and that's for all those users, right? So now let's figure out how much our floor price is per user per month. Our metric here, so by the way, there's metrics in pricing, is how are you going to measure what you're selling, right? In what units are you going to sell it? So in this case, we're going to sell per user per month, and in a certain bundle. So that's kind of our metric here. And so we're going to net this out to floor price per user. So in the bronze tier, we say we want minimum we want to charge $2.10 a user, and in the platinum bundle, we're going to charge $30 a user minimum, right? But our real price, the real price we targeted through our research and our customer willingness to pay and all that, we came up with this $10 a month for a bronze user and $60 for a platinum user. I'm kind of ignoring the tiers in between because you can look at those. But so now if you look at profit per user per month based on our price and our floor price, or our average selling price and our floor price, we'll see that on a bronze customer we'll make $7.90 per user per month, and on a platinum customer we'll make almost $30 per user, $29.52 per user per month. So those are more valuable customers, but there's less of them. So then if we just go one step further and just kind of look at what does that look like per tier now or per bundle? How much are we going to make per bundle? We're technically making less in the platinum tier, but we're making a lot more per user. So, this isn't always how it goes. The math works differently for different products, but kind of in this example here, that's just kind of how I worked it out. But this just gives you a kind of a holistic picture of how you take these costs, map them out, get that floor price, take your average selling price that you want to achieve, and then and I say average selling price because maybe there's a time of the year where that platinum bundle gets discounted down to $40 a month or $50 a month, or I don't know. So we have a value range to sell in. So we might sell lower from time to time because we have a coupon or things like that. So think of things like that. But this is kind of how that nets out and how you can look at how much are you going to gain or lose by selling at a certain price, and what does it cost you to fulfill that product. I just want to hit on this again, kind of in a more, so that's kind of my account manager example, kind of more detailed level. But I want to go back to some of these more generic things about some of the questions asked earlier and things like that. So in our account manager example, there's only one way to pay, and it's a monthly subscription cost. But there's lots of other kinds of products, right? And so, like I mentioned, social media networks and even free apps you have on your phones and things like that, you're not paying with money, you're paying with time and attention as a consumer, right? So if you play Pokemon Go, you're initially paying with time and attention, but there's a point where you can upgrade and buy add-ons or whatever and actually spend money, right? So there's even hybrid models where you start off in this freemium model paying with time and attention, but eventually you decide to pay actual dollars, or maybe in another way, by giving them access to your data or things like that. And so, that's another way to pay. So when I say data and selling access to insights, if you use Google, every time you click on a link, they track that. They get to see who's clicking on what links. If you use Facebook and you click on an ad, whether you buy something or not, they see what, there's feedback given. Everything you do on these apps or, cloud solutions are tracked, right? And so in some way, even if you're not paying for it with money, you're paying for it with time and attention, but you're also paying for it with your data. They collect information about you, your habits, your behaviors, depending on what service you're using and what you've opted into or not. But even if it's aggregate data, even if it's not your personal information, every time you click a link, it's tracked. Every time you open a page, it's tracked. Every time you leave a page, potentially it's tracked. So all these and other activities as well, right? So those would be like engagement type activities. But they're all tracked. It's all data, even at an aggregate level. And that data has value to someone, which is why they're collecting it. And so it either helps them make the product better, or they sell, like Zillow, might sell access to that data, or might use that data in other ways. But I'm just throwing names out here. So, but I don't have any affiliations with any of them. And then influence, right? So Instagram, people, they're influencers who use Instagram and build up followings and things like that. And so platforms like Instagram, typically I would expect they would like that, and that it brings traffic to their app or their site or their service. And so that attracts others and increases adoption of the service and things like that. Same thing for freemium games. Some like 90-something% of freemium game users are non-paying users, but by having those people playing the game, they provide a built-in audience for the 5 to 10% that are paying. So if those 90% stop playing, those 5 to 10% would stop paying because there's no one to play against, right? So that's a way that influence, is used to, influence and time and attention and data are used, right? And then money is the obvious, direct currency transferable value. But so then a couple other things, right? So there's packaging, which I haven't talked anything about or not much about. So those bundles I showed, the platinum, gold, silver, those are what's called packaging, right? So it's taking features and bundling them together into a product, and so that's that's how it's packaged. And then the metric is the unit by which you charge your customers. So for our account manager product, it was per user per month. For services on like an EC2 server or a compute resource on Amazon, Google, whatever, Microsoft, Azure, it's like pennies per month or pennies per hour per month kind of thing. So for how long they're up, storage could be gigabytes per month. Network traffic could be again, some measurement of gigabytes or network traffic per month. Other things, per photo per month, per impression for an ad type network, per impression, per click through. These are all different types of metrics that you'd see, you could price your product at. So every type of product will have a different, per sword or gem or whatever in a game, right? So all these are the metrics by which you sell your stuff, so sell your product. So this would be like an example of that packaging for that account manager product. And each of these would have a different set of features geared towards a different type of customer or a different type of business. So again, these are some metric examples for API call, credits if it's like a virtual economy type thing, storage per order or per sale. If it's like an e-commerce platform, you might bill a company using your platform by how many orders they generate a month or how many products they list a month, things like that. So these are just typical examples. There's also way more than just this, but these are just some examples. But again, the net of this is whatever you choose to package, however you choose to package and whatever metrics you choose, it has to be something that your customer and your user understand. It has to represent in some way the way they use that product. Otherwise, it makes no sense for them, and they don't really understand why they're buying what they're buying, or there's too many features they're not going to use, or the pricing is too confusing, right? So if this is one of my learnings from my patent days, is and this was part of research back then, right? One of our goals was in this early microservices marketplace was we had microservices for like creating orders and other e-commerce systems and creating customer records and other CRM systems and things like that. And so instead of charging per API call, right, we would charge per customer entered or per order created, which could be 2, 3, 4 API calls. But the reason for that is if it takes 2 or 3 API calls to create an order, maybe sometimes it takes 4, sometimes it takes 1. Like, it's unpredictable how much it costs to create an order. So most e-commerce companies won't know how to extrapolate that cost. How many API calls will it take? But every single one of them can tell you how they predict number of sales and number of orders and number of customers. And so those are metrics that tightly align to their business model and things that they totally understand. And so then those costs become predictable for them and understandable. So if your costs or if your metrics or packaging is unpredictable or not understood by your customer, it is not successful. It will not be successful. So cool. So here's just some of these pricing model examples. I've already referred, kind of alluded to some of these, but there's like the free model, right? And I'm going to call those like social networks and search, search engines. So things that to the consumer are totally free. The most of the people using it, totally free. You never pay for it as a consumer. And so there's that adage that came out, I don't remember how many years ago, but that you're not the customer, you're the product. I don't really believe that, in that you are choosing to pay for it, just not with money. So you're not the product, you're the user. If it made you unhappy or it wasn't worth you spending your time and attention on it, you wouldn't use it. So you are paying with time and attention, and you're getting a value from doing it. And for different people, it might have different values. But They might get a different ROI out of using it, but in the end, you are paying with time and you're getting something out of using it, or you wouldn't be doing so. And so I think you are not the product, you are the customer. You may be both the customer and the product. So your time and attention is monetized by advertisers, and the social network or search engine that lives in between you and that advertiser is basically taking a spiff off the top, right? They're skimming the take there, right? But I used to be a semi-professional poker player, so I use gambling adages a lot. So so that middleman of the search engine or social network, they're going to take a spiff on every thing the advertiser pays, take a cut, right? And so but you're getting value by using it. The social network or search engine's getting value by monetizing your time and attention, and the advertiser's getting value by placing those ads. And if the value wasn't being created for all three parties, the system would fall apart and it wouldn't work, and the product would go away. So, that's my thesis on those free products. So freemium, sort of related, but this is that more like those games and things like that where some large percentage of the population doesn't pay, but some percentage does. At some point decides to upgrade from not paying to paying. And usually there's a benefit in having both. So in some cases, the freemium model starts out, so for like B2B software, that freemium model might start with some limited amount of usage, limited number of usage per month, or 30 days free, or something like that. And at some point, to continue using the service, you might need to pay. Or you've reached the free limits of the offering, and now you're 30 posts per month or whatever, you're doing that, and now you've got to pay for 1,000 posts per month or something. So, so then you'll upgrade and pay for that. So there's different, the games one I mentioned before, 95% of people don't pay, but they provide an audience for the 5% that do. So, things like that. But there's a clear advantage in the software publisher for having both paying and non-paying users in both cases. And in the business, the B2B version where you start off not paying but eventually do, it's you figure out, is it useful to me? Am I getting value from it? If you have a 30-day free subscription, if you're the software publisher, you better hope that the customer gets the value they expect to get in those 30 days, right? Like they're not gonna start paying on day 31 if they haven't realized what value they're going to get yet in those first 30 days, right? So if your time horizon or time to value horizon is too long and your free period isn't long enough, you're likely not to get very many conversions to paying. So then there's like tiered pricing, right? A lot of B2B packages will have this where this is kind of those bundles I showed earlier where you'll have different tiers of the product, different feature bundles at different tiers with different price points, each representing a different customer type or different user persona, where each bundle fits a different user type differently. And they might be a journey over time, right? You might start at the lowest price bundle and progress up to the most expensive bundle as time goes on, based on how your needs shift as a business or user. So these are other another model. Then there's like pay as you go or pay per use. These are quite typical on infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. All your cloud providers these days, you're paying per use, per compute hour, per gigabyte of data, things like that, per image analyzed, things like that. Even marketing and advertising, advertisers pay this way. Per 1,000 impressions, per 1,000 clicks, things like that. But these are often very granular metrics, pay as you go, and so it's really paying for everything you use, not like a flat monthly fee. Cool. And sometimes more expensive than buying in bulk, but often these providers will often have a bulk buying option or pre-negotiated price sort of option when you get to certain usage tiers. So that's quite popular also. And so that's it, right? So today I think we covered a lot of ground, right, so we talked about how product managers create value for customers, how customers pay for that value created by the products they use, how we price the value of the product, different pricing models, and then kind of some examples of pricing methodologies along the way.